Why is it that some of America's most vibrant cities, filled with opportunity and energy, also hide corners of despair so deep they stir fear? The crisis of homelessness in America is more than just the loss of shelter. It's a tangled web of poverty, addiction, and systemic failure. In this video, we're taking you inside the 10 most dangerous places where homeless populations endure some of the harshest realities, places scarred by crime, neglect, and the devastating reach of fentanyl. These communities are often ignored, but they reveal the true depth of the crisis and the urgent need for solutions. Stay with us as we uncover the hidden struggles in America's streets and ask the question, what will it take to bring real change? Homelessness in America exposes the deep fractures in our nation's foundation. On any given night, nearly 580,000 people go without shelter, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's 2023 data. The crisis is concentrated in cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. Urban centers overflowing with wealth, yet crippled by a widening divide. Skyrocketing rents, stagnant wages, and a shortage of mental health support push countless people to the brink. How is it that places pulsing with opportunity fail to provide even basic shelter for their own?
It is. The rent is too high. It's even going up in even these rooming houses, and people are using drugs to escape, and the drug use is making you come out here more. You don't pay your rent, you're not working enough, and that's part of contributing to the problem.
The roots of this crisis run deep. Housing costs continue to climb, shutting out those already struggling while affordable units vanish. Mental health challenges, too often untreated because of poor access to care, leave many adrift. Addiction, especially to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid tearing through communities, keeps thousands locked in a relentless cycle of dependence. These forces don't just strip away homes, they breed instability, transforming urban corners into zones marked by crime, filth, and fear. How can one of the richest nations on earth allow such suffering to fester? The areas we're about to explore aren't only dangerous for the people forced to live there, they're also tests of our collective conscience. Encampments filled with tents, tarps, and despair reflect more than individual misfortune. They reveal systemic failures. Where hope fades, crime thrives, and unsanitary conditions magnify the misery. From Skid Row in Los Angeles to Kensington in Philadelphia, these hotspots remind us to look past the statistics. What does it say about us when these scenes unfold in plain sight, yet solutions remain out of reach? Homelessness in America is not just a policy problem, it is a moral challenge. It demands that we confront the inequities leaving so many behind and ask the hardest question of all, how can we rebuild a system that truly serves everyone? To identify the most dangerous homeless encampments in America, we look at clear factors that reveal the depth of the crisis. The first is population density. In cities like Los Angeles and Philadelphia, thousands pack into sprawling camps with tents and tarps lining sidewalks or filling vacant lots. Such crowded conditions leave people exposed to the elements, illness, and violence. With little access to clean water or sanitation, daily life becomes a relentless fight for survival. How can such neglected spaces exist in the middle of thriving cities? Crime is another defining measure. High levels of violence, theft, and drug-related activity create a climate of constant fear for both those living in the camps and those nearby. Fentanyl, the opioid driving a surge in overdoses nationwide, magnifies this danger. Its presence turns already fragile communities into hotspots of despair. Why do these areas so often become breeding grounds for crime and addiction? And what does that reveal about our priorities as a society? We also consider the broader social impact. These locations frequently appear in headlines and government reports, marking them as flashpoints of concern. They strain local services, discourage tourism, and heighten public safety challenges, all symptoms of systemic failure in addressing homelessness in America. By focusing on population density, living conditions, crime, and social consequences, we highlight the places where neglect is most visible. These criteria don't just define danger, they expose the cracks in our social fabric. The real question is, what will it take to confront these failures and deliver lasting solutions? Our exploration aims to shine a light on these struggling areas, reminding us to see beyond statistics and recognize the human cost of inaction. Fentanyl is tearing through America's homeless communities, turning lives already marked by hardship into battles for survival. This synthetic opioid, 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, claimed more than 70,000 lives in 2021, according to the CDC, and the toll has only climbed since. Cheap and widely available, fentanyl preys on the most vulnerable, those without access to healthcare, treatment, or stable shelter. For many on the streets, it's more than a drug. It's a chain, locking them in cycles of despair. How can we stand by while this poison tightens its grip? Why does fentanyl strike the unhoused so brutally? Its low price and easy availability make it a quick escape from the pain of street life. In places like Kensington in Philadelphia or Skid Row in Los Angeles, open-air drug markets thrive, with fentanyl often laced into other substances, raising overdose risks sky high.
Oh, that is a crazy feeling, and it's not a fun feeling at all. When you wake up, you get very sick, because it sucks all the drugs out of you, so you have nothing.
The fallout is devastating. Deaths mount, fights erupt, and crime spreads fear across entire neighborhoods. Needles scattered on sidewalks turn public spaces into hazards, symbols of a crisis left unchecked. What does it say about us when entire city blocks become battlegrounds of addiction? Certain communities carry the heaviest burden. Kensington, grimly known as America's fentanyl capital, is lined with people slumped on sidewalks, struggling in conditions no one should endure. In Skid Row, fentanyl fuels overdoses and violent clashes. In San Francisco's Tenderloin, open drug use scars the streets, driving away residents and businesses. Already crushed by homelessness, these areas are pushed further into hopelessness by fentanyl's relentless spread. How can we turn away when whole neighborhoods are drowning in despair right before our eyes? Addressing this crisis requires more than arresting dealers. Real solutions mean accessible detox programs, safe consumption sites, and comprehensive mental health services, resources that remain scarce or tangled in red tape. Housing, healthcare, and addiction treatment must work hand in hand to break the cycle. If we fail, these encampments will only spiral further, dragging entire communities down with them. And the question we must all face is this: can we truly call ourselves a caring society when people are dying on our streets, unseen and unaided. The crisis of homelessness in America is most visible in certain urban pockets where desperation, neglect, and danger collide. These locations, marked by dense populations of unhoused individuals, dire living conditions, and the relentless grip of fentanyl, stand as stark symbols of systemic failure. Each encampment is more than just a statistic. It is a human tragedy demanding our reflection and action. As we explore these sites, one question lingers. What does it say about a society when its most vulnerable are left to survive in such perilous conditions? Skid Row, Los Angeles, California. In the heart of Los Angeles lies Skid Row, stretching across roughly 50 city blocks and home to thousands of unhoused residents. It is one of the largest and most infamous encampments in the nation, a sprawling maze of tents, tarps, and makeshift shelters. The conditions are dire: sidewalks choked with debris, little to no sanitation, and an atmosphere heavy with despair. Fentanyl has tightened its grip here, driving overdose deaths and violent clashes tied to the drug trade. Crime is rampant, with assaults and theft a daily reality, leaving safety as a privilege rather than a right. Despite sporadic outreach efforts, soaring housing costs and inadequate shelter capacity keep Skid Row entrenched as a lasting emblem of neglect. How can a city of such wealth allow this to endure in plain sight? Tenderloin, San Francisco, California. San Francisco's Tenderloin district, sitting in the shadow of immense tech wealth, is a grim counterpoint of poverty and struggle. Hundreds of unhoused residents crowd the sidewalks, living in tents surrounded by filth and discarded needles. Open-air drug markets thrive here, with fentanyl fueling addiction, overdoses, and violence. Crime rates, muggings, assaults, thefts create an environment of constant peril for both the unhoused and the surrounding community. The city's sky-high housing prices and limited shelter beds drive this concentration of suffering, while intervention programs struggle to keep pace. The Tenderloin's chaos highlights the disconnect between economic success and social equity, showing how prosperity can coexist with staggering neglect. Efforts at reform face fierce resistance, making it clear that only bold, systemic solutions can restore dignity and safety to this district. Downtown Seattle, Washington. Downtown Seattle, particularly around Occidental Park, has become a hub for sprawling homeless encampments that stretch through parks and alleys. Thousands endure rain-soaked nights with little access to food, shelter, or hygiene. Fentanyl spread has fueled overdoses and drug-related crime, casting a heavy shadow over the city's core. Despite Seattle's progressive reputation, the housing shortage overwhelms local policy, leaving many exposed and vulnerable. Tiny home villages offer glimmers of hope, but the demand far exceeds what's available. The clash between public safety concerns and calls for compassion has created deep tension, underscoring the urgent need to align humanitarian ideals with effective governance. Kensington, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Kensington, grimly known as America's fentanyl capital, is the epicenter of addiction in North Philadelphia. Hundreds of unhoused people shelter in abandoned lots, under bridges, and along syringe-strewn sidewalks. Fentanyl dominates the open-air drug markets here, fueling turf wars and violence that make survival treacherous. Poverty and scarce social services worsen the crisis, while harm reduction efforts struggle against the epidemic's sheer scale. The neighborhood's conditions reflect a failure to confront addiction's root causes, leaving residents trapped in a cycle of neglect. Community initiatives exist, but most face funding shortfalls. To reclaim lives from fentanyl's grip, Kensington needs urgent investment in both housing and treatment. The Bowery, New York City, New York. In Lower Manhattan, the Bowery remains a historic symbol of homelessness in America, even as parts of the district have been revitalized. After dark, unhoused individuals gather in parks and along sidewalks, where they face cold nights, threats of violence, and the deadly rise of fentanyl. Addiction has fueled petty crime and medical emergencies, straining both residents and responders. New York's crushing rents and overcrowded shelters push people onto the streets, with winter weather compounding the danger. While outreach programs and housing initiatives show promise, they can't keep pace with the scale of need. The Bowery's persistence is a stark reminder that urban progress means little if the most vulnerable are left behind. Venice Beach, Los Angeles, California. Beneath the sunshine and tourist crowds, Venice Beach hides a darker reality. Along its boardwalk, hundreds of unhoused residents live in tents and broken-down RVs, their struggles starkly contrasted against nearby million-dollar homes. The surge of fentanyl has fueled disputes that sometimes erupt into violence, while poor sanitation and rising crime tarnish the area's allure. Mild weather draws the unhoused here, but limited shelter beds and soaring housing costs leave few options for stability. Cleanup sweeps often displace encampments without addressing the root crisis. Venice Beach's contradictions force the community to wrestle with a hard question: how do you balance tourism and compassion? Sustainable housing and addiction support are critical to restoring both dignity and safety to this iconic coastline. Downtown Portland, Oregon. Portland's Old Town Chinatown and nearby Washington Park have become ground zero for sprawling encampments. Hundreds of unhoused individuals live in tents surrounded by urban decay, while fentanyl drives overdoses and crime at alarming rates. The city's housing shortage, combined with permissive camping policies, has made visible homelessness impossible to ignore, straining both resources and public trust. Sanitation issues and safety concerns fuel community anger, leading to demands for stricter enforcement. Portland's struggle reflects the broader tension between progressive ideals and the need for urban order. While emergency shelters and outreach efforts exist, they fall far short of the demand. Real progress requires bold investment in affordable housing and addiction treatment so that compassion becomes more than rhetoric. South Bronx, New York City, New York. The South Bronx, the poorest borough in New York City, remains one of the hardest hit areas for homelessness. Many unhoused individuals shelter in abandoned buildings or survive on the streets through brutal winters. Fentanyl spread fuels addiction, crime, and despair, compounding already dire conditions. Chronic poverty and underfunded services perpetuate the cycle, despite periodic outreach attempts. The crisis here underscores how economic inequality drives homelessness in America, leaving neighborhoods like the South Bronx trapped in hardship. Addressing it will require urgent investment in affordable housing, stronger addiction services, and community health programs. Without it, the cycle of despair will continue, deepening one of the city's most entrenched struggles. Albuquerque, New Mexico. In Albuquerque, tents and makeshift shelters cluster under overpasses, and in public parks, housing hundreds of the unhoused. Fentanyl's rise has brought a wave of overdoses and violent incidents, including targeted assaults against homeless residents. Limited shelter space and economic strain push more people into these encampments, while community service efforts remain chronically underfunded. The conditions highlight how resource scarcity magnifies urban despair. Breaking the cycle will require expanding shelters, strengthening addiction treatment, and rethinking local policy to ensure safety for the city's most vulnerable. Albuquerque's crisis is not just a local issue. It's a stark reminder of what happens when compassion is not matched with investment and action. Miami, Florida. In downtown Miami, especially beneath the city's sprawling overpasses, hundreds of unhoused residents endure sweltering heat and unsanitary conditions. Fentanyl's spread has fueled drug-related crime, turning these encampments into unsafe zones for both residents and passersby. Soaring housing costs and limited shelter capacity compound the crisis, while city cleanup sweeps often scatter people without offering long-term solutions. Miami's struggle highlights the clash between rapid urban growth and urgent human need. Community initiatives exist, but are hampered by systemic barriers, leaving many unhoused, exposed, and vulnerable. Real progress will require investment in affordable housing and addiction treatment, ensuring stability over displacement. Miami's encampments stand as a stark reminder that true progress must include compassion for those living in the shadows of its glittering skyline. From Skid Row's sprawling tent cities to the overpasses of Miami, America's most dangerous encampments share common threads: unaffordable housing, underfunded social services, and the relentless spread of fentanyl. Each of these locations is more than a local tragedy. Together, they reflect a national crisis where systemic failures leave people vulnerable to violence, addiction, and despair. And the effects don't stop at the camp's edge. Declining public safety, strained city budgets, and diminished tourism and investment are ripple effects that impact entire communities. The fentanyl epidemic has only deepened the danger. Cheap and potent, the drug fuels addiction in places like Kensington and the Tenderloin, turning fragile encampments into battlegrounds of survival. Overdose deaths, crime, and discarded needles heighten the sense of chaos, making life perilous for both the unhoused and those living nearby. The looming question is, what will it take to dismantle this cycle of suffering? There are models that offer hope. The Housing First approach, which prioritizes permanent housing before treatment, has shown promise, but demands significant, sustained investment. Addiction services, especially for fentanyl, require detox programs, harm reduction strategies like supervised injection sites, and widespread access to naloxone. Yet, political resistance often stalls these efforts. Mental health support is just as critical, since untreated disorders push many onto the streets. But here too, obstacles loom: limited funding and community opposition to shelters or treatment centers opening in their neighborhoods. The persistence of these encampments is a sobering reminder that a society's moral compass is revealed in how it treats its most vulnerable. Moving forward will require more than sympathy. It will demand serious investments in affordable housing, accessible addiction treatment, and mental health care, alongside policies that confront fentanyl's deadly grip. These encampments, bleak as they are also opportunities for change. They challenge us to rethink our priorities and act with compassion, so that rebuilding lives becomes not just an aspiration, but a collective mission. 6. Conclusion. The 10 encampments we've explored are not just dangerous, they're symptoms of a deeper fracture in America's social fabric. From the fentanyl-scarred corners of Kensington to the tent-lined sidewalks of Skid Row, these places reveal our nation's failure to provide the most basic necessities: shelter, safety, and hope. Homelessness in America cannot be solved with temporary fixes. It requires systemic change, investment in affordable housing, robust addiction treatment, and accessible mental health support. These are not optional. They're essential if we are to break the cycles of despair we've seen across the country. As you reflect on these places, don't see them as distant problems, but as shared responsibilities. Each tent, each tarp shelters a human story of loss, of struggle, and of resilience. Real progress begins when we acknowledge that truth and act on it. Engage with local initiatives, support organizations fighting for change, and advocate for policies that prioritize dignity and stability over neglect and displacement. Only through collective action can we begin to heal these wounds and build a future where no one is left behind.